Emma Brooks never imagined that the hardest day of her life would also become the beginning of an extraordinary journey. On a cold, rainy afternoon, she walked down the courthouse steps holding the hand of her 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. In her other hand was a small cardboard box containing family photographs, a few legal papers, and the last pieces of the life she once knew. After years of marriage, the divorce had left her with almost nothing. Their small apartment was gone. Most of their savings had disappeared in legal fees, and every new day seemed to bring another bill she couldn't afford to pay. For weeks, Emma searched for work while trying to keep a smile on her face whenever Sophie looked at her. She refused to let her daughter see how frightened she really was. One quiet morning, as rain tapped softly against the motel window where they had been staying, Emma's phone rang. The caller introduced himself as Attorney Michael Harris. "Ms. Brooks," he said calmly, "I'm calling regarding the estate of your grandfather, William Brooks. According to his will, you are the sole beneficiary." Emma was speechless. "My grandfather?" she whispered. She hadn't seen him in nearly 15 years. She assumed he had forgotten about her. The attorney continued. "He left you one property, Brooks Bookstore, located in the Blue Ridge Mountains." Emma thanked him politely, but after ending the call, she laughed softly to herself. An abandoned bookstore. It certainly wasn't the miracle she had hoped for. Still, with nothing left to lose, she packed their few belongings into her aging car and began the long drive toward the mountains. As the city disappeared behind them, the landscape transformed into rolling hills, towering pine trees, and winding country roads. Sophie pressed her face against the window, amazed by the beauty outside. Hours later, they arrived. The bookstore stood quietly at the end of a peaceful street. Its faded wooden sign still read Brooks Bookstore. The red brick walls were covered in ivy, and dusty windows reflected the golden evening sun. It looked forgotten by the world. Emma unlocked the heavy wooden door with the brass key the attorney had mailed to her. The door creaked open. The scent of old books filled the air. Towering shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with thousands of books that had waited patiently for years. As Emma slowly walked through the store, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. But the feeling didn't last long. A black luxury SUV stopped outside. A well-dressed businessman stepped out and smiled confidently. "My name is Victor Kane," he said. "I've been trying to buy this property for years." He placed an envelope on the counter. Inside was a check for $200,000. "Take the money," Victor said. "The building is old, the business is dead, and maintaining it will only ruin your future." Emma looked around the silent bookstore. She looked at Sophie, then back at the check. For a moment, she considered accepting. It would solve every financial problem they had. But something didn't feel right. Just as Victor drove away, Sophie called from the children's reading corner. "Mom, I found something." Hidden inside an old storybook was a yellow envelope. Emma carefully opened it. The first line made her heart stop. "If you're reading this, someone has already tried to buy this bookstore. Whatever you do, don't trust them." Emma read the letter again. "If you're reading this, someone has already tried to buy this bookstore. Whatever you do, don't trust them." Her hands began to shake. There was no signature, only one final sentence. "The answers are hidden where every story begins." Emma looked around the quiet bookstore. "What does that mean?" she whispered. For the next several hours, she searched every shelf. Nothing. She checked the office. Nothing. She searched the dusty basement. Still nothing. As the evening sun streamed through the windows, Sophie wandered toward the children's reading corner. She smiled as she sat on an old wooden chair. "Mom, Grandpa used to read fairy tales to me right here." Emma froze. "Where every story begins?" "The children's section." She slowly moved the old chair aside. Beneath it was a loose wooden floorboard. Her heart raced. She carefully lifted it. Hidden underneath was a small iron box covered in dust. The lock had rusted with age, but after a few gentle attempts, it opened. Inside were three things: an old brass key, a leather journal, and a bundle of handwritten letters tied together with faded blue ribbon. Emma carefully opened the journal. The first page read, "If you've found this, you've chosen curiosity over convenience. I'm proud of you." Tears filled her eyes. Page after page described her grandfather's life. He wasn't simply a bookstore owner. He quietly paid school fees for children whose parents couldn't afford them. He donated books to local schools. He helped struggling families every winter without ever asking for recognition. To him, the bookstore had never been a business. It was the heart of the community. Near the end of the journal, one sentence caught Emma's attention. "Victor Kane doesn't want this bookstore. He wants the land behind it." Emma frowned. The land behind the bookstore was just an overgrown forest. Why would anyone pay $200,000 for that? The next morning, she drove to the county records office. An elderly clerk searched through decades-old property maps. After several minutes, he looked surprised. "Mrs. Brooks, according to these records, this property includes nearly 3 acres behind the bookstore." Emma stared at him. 3 acres? The clerk nodded. Most people never knew because the land was never developed. Curious, Emma walked behind the bookstore later that afternoon. The trees were dense. Nature had reclaimed almost everything. As she pushed through the brush, she stopped in disbelief. Hidden among the trees stood the remains of an old stone schoolhouse. Its walls were cracked. The roof had partially collapsed, but the building still stood proudly. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly. An elderly man smiled warmly. "My name is Henry Collins. I was your grandfather's closest friend." Henry looked at the journal in Emma's hands and nodded. "So, you finally found it." Emma's eyes widened. "You knew about this?" Henry smiled. "Your grandfather spent years protecting this place." He explained that decades earlier, William Brooks had purchased the land to stop a construction company from destroying the historic schoolhouse. That school had educated generations of local families. It represented the town's history. When William passed away, very few people knew the truth. But someone eventually discovered valuable documents proving the land could be sold for a luxury resort. That someone was Victor Kane. Henry looked directly into Emma's eyes. "Victor doesn't care about books. He wants to erase history." Emma finally understood. The bookstore wasn't the real treasure. The land behind it was, and her grandfather had trusted her to protect it. Victor Kane didn't waste any time. The very next morning, black SUVs pulled up outside Brooks' bookstore. Victor stepped out with 2 lawyers. "Emma," he said calmly, "I'll increase my offer to $500,000. Emma remained silent. Victor smiled. "Think about your daughter. This money changes your life forever." Emma looked at Sophie, then at the old bookstore behind her. "My grandfather didn't leave this place to be sold," she replied. "He left it to be protected." Victor's smile disappeared. "You'll regret this." Over the next few weeks, strange things began happening. Anonymous complaints were filed against the bookstore. Building inspectors arrived almost every day. Rumors spread throughout the town that the bookstore would soon close forever. Emma felt overwhelmed. Every evening she wondered if she had made the wrong decision. Then something unexpected happened. Henry Collins shared the true story of William Brooks with the local newspaper. Within days, people from all over the town began visiting the bookstore. Former students remembered receiving free books from William. Parents remembered how he secretly paid school fees when families struggled. Teachers recalled boxes of donated books arriving every year. One by one, people stepped forward with stories Emma had never heard before. The bookstore was no longer just an old building. It was a symbol of kindness. Volunteers cleaned the shelves. Carpenters repaired broken furniture. Artists painted colorful murals for the children's reading corner. Local businesses donated supplies. For the first time in years, the bookstore was filled with laughter. Victor watched everything from a distance. He knew he was losing. Determined to win, he filed a lawsuit claiming the property records were invalid. The case quickly reached the county court. On the day of the hearing, Emma walked into the courtroom with Henry beside her. She carried only one thing: her grandfather's leather journal. Victor's lawyers confidently presented expensive reports and legal documents. Then Emma handed the journal to the judge. Inside were handwritten property records, signed agreements, historical preservation papers, and letters proving William Brooks had purchased the land specifically to protect the old schoolhouse for future generations. The courtroom fell silent. The judge carefully examined every page. After several hours, the decision was announced. The court officially recognized Brooks' Bookstore and the surrounding land as protected historical property. Victor Kane's development proposal was permanently rejected. Emma had won. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded her. One asked, "What are you going to do now?" Emma smiled. "I'm simply going to continue what my grandfather started." Months passed. The abandoned bookstore slowly transformed into something extraordinary. Children filled the reading room every weekend. The restored schoolhouse became a free community learning center. Authors traveled from across the country to hold book readings. Families gathered beneath the old oak trees behind the bookstore. The place that once seemed forgotten had become the heart of the town again. One quiet evening, Emma stood outside watching the sunset. Sophie ran through the garden laughing with other children. Henry walked over and smiled. William would be proud. Emma looked toward the bookstore sign, gently swaying in the breeze. She thought about the day she almost accepted Victor's offer. If she had taken the money, none of this would exist. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. Sometimes it's a purpose. Sometimes it's the chance to protect something that money can never replace. Emma realized her grandfather hadn't simply left her a bookstore. He had entrusted her with a legacy of compassion, courage, and hope. And as the lights inside Brooks' bookstore glowed warmly against the evening sky, she knew that legacy would continue for generations to come. Because some treasures are measured not by their price, but by the lives they change.